So recently, I've been experimenting in shooting full frame with the Blazar Remus 35mm, which is a S35 lens. And I really love the results. Since using more of the image circle than you're supposed to, you get a lot of barrel distortion, crazy bokeh, and vintage characteristics. And to me, this is a very unique and interesting way to use this lens. So I've been using the Blazar Remus 35mm for around a year now. I've shot a lot of personal projects with it. I used it for pretty much all of my YouTube videos. It's actually my main talking head lens, and I even used it on a feature film. And this is the lens that got me into anamorphic filmmaking. And when shooting with this lens, I've been mainly using the Lumix S5. And the thing about the Blazar Remus 35mm is that it's a S35 lens. So when shooting with the Lumix S5, which is a full frame camera, you need to use the APS-C crop on the camera to use the full image circle. And I have no issues with it. I really like the image that I get from this lens, shooting this way. However, recently, I've been experimenting in shooting in full frame mode with this lens. For example, right now in this talking head, I'm shooting in full frame mode. And obviously you get some hard vignetting on the sides, but you get no vignetting top and bottom. So this means that you can crop into the image to get rid of the hard vignetting and still keeping the full vertical frame. So this works great if you want to shoot in 239x1, 2x1, or even 16x9, which is what I'm doing with all my talking heads. I always crop into 60x9. However, when shooting with the Lumix S5 in 60x9 mode, this means that you're cropping out quite a lot of the frame that you could still be using that isn't hard vignetting. So I recently bought the Lumix S1, which has an open gate mode, and I found that shooting with open gate with the Lumix S1 and shooting with the Blazar Remus 35mm, if you zoom into a 60x9 crop, you lose all the hard vignetting while still keeping the full vertical frame, which is similar to what we did with the Lumix S5. However, now we get to use more of the vertical frame, and you crop it in such a way where the hard vignetting is cropped out by just an inch. So you get maximum use of the horizontal image circle of the Blazar Remus 35mm. So the thing about the Blazar Remus 35mm is that it has quite a lot of barrel distortion, which to me, when shooting with anamorphic lenses, is what I want. This means that you get a little bit of a fisheye feel, and straight lines becomes curved. This is more noticeable on the outer edge of the frame. And since we're shooting more of the image circle when shooting in full frame mode, this means that you get even more anamorphic characteristics than you would otherwise. So this means that you get even more barrel distortion. The great thing about the Blazar Remus 35mm is that you can shoot in T1.6. And when shooting with this lens wide open, everything that's in focus is surprisingly sharp. So when I've been shooting in full frame mode with the Blazar Remus 35mm, everything that I've shot has been shot wide open. And this really helps enunciate and exaggerate the characteristics you get from this lens. When zooming into the bokeh, you can see that things that are out of focus kind of gets this smudged look, which to me gives the image a more trippy look, especially when pairing that with the barrel distortion. So when especially shooting wide shots, even though things are in focus, everything on top and bottom looks a little bit out of focus. So when shooting this way, I'm sure to have a little bit of headroom so that the subject doesn't become out of focus. But I do really like this radial blur because it helps in separating the subject even more. And since you're shooting with a 35mm lens with a 1.5x squeeze in full frame mode, this means that you get around a 24mm equivalent. And when pairing that with the aperture of T1.6, the exaggerated barrel distortion, the smeared trippy bokeh, and radial blur, you get a very crazy look where the subject really pops out of the screen. And since you're zooming into a 60x9 crop and you're not shooting in a cinemascope, this means that to me, you get a little bit less of an anamorphic look and you get more of a vintage look. I feel like you get a similar look like you get with the Helios with the swirly bokeh. So the image I'm getting with this lens reminds me of something out of Poor Things. And to me, it kind of shows the versatility of an anamorphic lens. You don't have to only use anamorphic lenses to get a wide image. You can still crop into 60x9 and still keep all out the anamorphic characteristics. So obviously this look doesn't fit every project, but I do think it would be interesting in trying this look on a feature film or a short film or a music video where you need a more trippy look, like a horror film. And it's also a relatively cheap way to get a more stylized look. But I probably wouldn't use this for corporate videos or infomercials. But I do think shooting this way is a great way to make your image stand out. There are some downsides in shooting this way. First off, like mentioned earlier, it might be too stylized for some people. Another downside is the close focus. So when shooting in APS-C mode with the Blazar Remus 35mm, the close focus is already pretty poor. You can't really get super close-ups without the diopter, and the closer you can get without the diopter is a close-up of the face from neck and up. And when shooting in full frame mode, this gets even worse. So obviously, when you're shooting in full frame mode, you zoom out of the image circle, so the closest you can get when shooting in full frame is a medium close-up, which in some projects, it might be all you need, and obviously this can be fixed with a diopter, but it's something to be aware of. Another reason is that if you're shooting with IBIS, since you're shooting with hard vignetting, the vignetting tends to move back and forth due to the IBIS, and if you zoom into a 60x9 crop, if you shake the camera a lot, the hard vignetting tends to move a little bit, so you might get into the frame. So you might need to zoom into the frame a little bit more. Also, since there's so much barrel distortion, this means that the IBIS is having a harder time in stabilizing the image, and there's a higher chance you get artifacts. If you don't move the camera a lot, it's not a big problem, but you can't really do shots where you're moving with the subject. So if you intend to shoot full frame with this lens, and you plan on moving a lot, you might need to turn off IBIS and put the camera on a tripod, for example. But to me, this is a really fun way to shoot with this lens. You get a very interesting look. Please do let me know in the comments what you guys think. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.